If you ever need help, write it where no one thinks to look. I didn't believe that advice would save me, but that night at Rossi's, it was the only thing I had left. The dinner rush wrapped around me like heat from an open oven, heavy and suffocating. The smell of garlic and red wine clinging to my hair as I moved between tables with a tray balanced on one hand. My smile felt painted on, careful and practiced, the way you learn when someone is always watching. Table 7 was by the window. He liked the window, said it made him feel important. I could feel his eyes on me even when my back was turned, tracking every step, every glance, every breath I took that wasn't about him. Emily, he had whispered before my shift, his fingers circling my wrist just tight enough to leave a memory. Don't embarrass me tonight. I nodded then, like I always did. At table 13 sat a man who didn't belong to the noise. Dark suit, white shirt open at the collar. Stillness in a room that pulsed with chatter. He hadn't looked at the menu once. He didn't need to. Men like that never needed to look twice at anything. When I approached with his bourbon, my hands were steady because I forced them to be. Another? I asked softly. His eyes lifted to mine, calm and unreadable, like deep water before a storm. Not yet, he said, voice low, controlled. I nodded and set down a fresh linen napkin beside his glass. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the way my pulse wouldn't slow. Maybe it was the way the room felt smaller with every pass by table 7. As I stepped back toward the service station, I picked up my pen and pretended to rewrite an order. My hand moved before my mind could stop it. For letters. Small. Pressed into the white fabric like a secret. Help. I folded the corners slightly so it wouldn't be obvious, telling myself the busboy might see it later, or the manager, or anyone who wasn't him. I turned to grab a tray just as a glass shattered near the bar. Heads turned. The noise swallowed everything for a second. When I looked back toward table 13, the man was already looking at the napkin. Not confused. Not surprised. Just aware. His fingers rested lightly beside the fabric, not touching the word, but close enough that I knew he had seen it. My heart stuttered. He lifted his gaze slowly, scanning the room once, deliberate, measured. His eyes passed over the hostess, the bartender, the exit, and finally landed on table 7. I felt it then, the shift. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet change in the air, like the moment before lightning splits the sky. He didn't stand. He didn't call anyone over. He simply leaned back in his chair, studying, watching, as if he had all the time in the world, as if he had already decided something. I turned away too quickly and nearly collided with another server. You okay? She whispered. Fine. I lied, smoothing my apron. But my pulse was racing now for a different reason. Because for the first time all night, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. And when I risked one more glance toward table 13, the napkin was gone, folded neatly in his hand, and the man in the dark suit was still watching me like he had noticed long before anyone else ever could. I felt the shift before anyone else did. It was not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet tightening in the air around table 13, like the room had leaned slightly in his direction without realizing it. I kept moving because that is what you do when you're trying not to panic. Refill water. Clear plates. Smile at strangers celebrating birthdays and promotions. Pretend your life is not balanced on 4 letters written in ink. When I passed table 7, he caught my wrist under the edge of the tablecloth, his grip hidden by white linen and candlelight. Why are you acting weird? He asked, voice low, almost pleasant. Anyone watching would have thought it was affection. I forced my expression to stay soft. I am just busy, I said. It is Friday night. His fingers tightened for half a second, then released. Do not forget who is here with you, he murmured. As if I could forget. I stepped away carefully, aware that my pulse was too fast, aware that if I looked toward table 13 again, it would mean something. But I did look, and he was still there, still seated, still composed. The napkin was no longer in sight. His bourbon glass sat untouched, amber liquid catching the warm light. One of the other men at his table leaned in to say something. He did not respond. He was watching the reflection in the mirror behind the bar, not the room directly. Watching angles. Watching exits. Watching me without turning his head. 10 minutes passed. Or maybe it was 30. Time moved strangely when you were waiting for something you could not name. Then the manager hurried over to me near the service station. Emily, he said quietly, glancing toward table 13. The gentleman at 13 would like to speak with you. My stomach dropped. Did I do something wrong? I asked. I do not think so, he replied, smoothing his tie. Just go. I walked toward the table feeling like every step was louder than it should have been. The conversations around us continued, forks against porcelain, low laughter, the clink of ice. When I reached him, he finally looked at me directly. Up close, his expression was calm, but there was something deliberate behind it, something that measured distance in inches and risk in seconds. You dropped this, he said, placing the folded napkin on the table between us. His voice was even, almost polite. I swallowed. I am sorry, I whispered automatically. I did not mean to leave anything behind. You did not, he said. His fingers rested on the edge of the linen. Is he your husband? The question caught me off guard. No, boyfriend. My silence answered for me. He nodded once, as if confirming a detail in his head. Does he always watch you like that? I felt heat rise to my face. Sir, I really should get back to work. He studied me for a long moment, not impatient, not unkind, just certain. You wrote this because you believed no one would see it, he said quietly. You were wrong. My breath caught. I could feel table 7 without looking, like a shadow pressing against my back. I cannot help you if you pretend you do not need it, he continued. But I do not intervene without reason. The word intervene settled heavily between us. Not rescue, not fight. Intervene. Controlled. Precise. I do not want trouble, I said carefully. His gaze shifted briefly past my shoulder, toward the window where my reflection stood next to his. Trouble has already chosen you, he replied. The question is whether you want it handled quietly. Handled. My heart was racing again, but not with the same helpless fear as before. This felt different, like standing on the edge of something that could change everything. I cannot leave, I said. I have another 2 hours on my shift. Something almost like amusement touched his expression. You will finish your shift, he said. You will act exactly the same. You will not look at me again. The certainty in his tone made my skin prickle. And him? I asked before I could stop myself. His eyes darkened slightly, not with anger, but with decision. He will make his own choice, he said, and I will respond accordingly. A shadow moved at the edge of my vision. I knew without turning that table 7 had stood up. Emily, my boyfriend called, too loudly, drawing attention from nearby tables. I stepped back instinctively. The man in the dark suit did not rise. He did not need to. He simply picked up his glass at last and took a slow sip, eyes never leaving mine. Do not write it next time, he said softly. Say it. Then he looked past me, toward the approaching footsteps, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop without anyone understanding why. He reached me before I could step away. What is going on? He asked, his hands settling at the small of my back in a way that looked protective to anyone watching. It felt like a warning. I kept my eyes level, my voice steady. Nothing, I said. Table 13 just had a question about the menu. His fingers pressed slightly, a reminder. Then why are you standing here like you forgot how to breathe? I forced a small laugh. Because you are making a scene. The man at table 13 did not stand, but he did shift his gaze from me to the man beside me, measuring him with a calm that felt colder than anger. Is there a problem? My boyfriend asked, turning toward the table with a smile that did not reach his eyes. The restaurant noise softened again, not silent, but aware. No problem. The man in the dark suit replied evenly. Your girlfriend dropped something. I returned it. His tone was polite, almost detached. My boyfriend's jaw tightened. We are good, he said, pulling me half a step closer. She does not need anything. I felt the words settle over me like a lid. Does not need anything. The man at the table tilted his head slightly. That is for her to decide, he said. Not louder, not sharper, just clear. My heart pounded so hard I was certain they could both hear it. I am fine, I said quickly, the reflex automatic. I did not look at either of them when I spoke. Silence stretched between the three of us. Then the man at the table gave a small nod, as if a file in his mind had been closed. Of course, he said. Enjoy your evening. He lifted his glass again, dismissing the tension without effort. It should have ended there. It should have dissolved back into clinking plates and polite conversation. But when my boyfriend guided me away toward the hallway that led to the restrooms, his grip tightened once we were out of sight of most of the dining room. Do not talk to him again, he said quietly. Men like that think they can buy whatever they want. I swallowed. I was just doing my job. He studied my face as if searching for something hidden beneath it. You looked at him, he said. Like you expected something. I shook my head. I did not. The hallway felt narrower than usual, the overhead lights too bright. I could still feel the weight of another gaze somewhere beyond the walls, steady and patient. We are leaving when your shift ends, he continued. No staying late. No talking to anyone. I need the tips, I replied before I could stop myself. His expression hardened for a fraction of a second, then smoothed back into something presentable. You do not need anything but me, he said softly. The words were meant to sound reassuring. They landed like a cage. A server pushed past us with a stack of plates, breaking the moment. I slipped back toward the dining room, my breath shallow. When I returned to the floor, I did exactly what I had been told. I did not look at table 13. I refilled water. I cleared dishes. I apologized for delays that were not my fault. But awareness is not something you can turn off. I felt it when he stood. Not abruptly, not dramatically, just a subtle movement that shifted the energy in the room again. His chair slid back with a soft scrape against the floor. His associates rose with him, automatic and silent. I kept my head down as they walked toward the exit, but I could see their reflection in the glass of the front windows. He paused near the door. For half a second, I thought he would leave without another word. Instead, he spoke to the manager, low and brief. The manager nodded quickly, almost respectfully. Then the man in the dark suit stepped out into the night air without looking back. My boyfriend watched the exit from table 7, tension still coiled in his shoulders. See, he said when I passed. He is gone. But something in his voice was less certain than before. And as I glanced toward the manager's stand, I noticed him checking his phone with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Focused. Alert. As if he had just received instructions he did not dare ignore. I told myself it meant nothing. I told myself I imagined the shift in the air. Yet when my phone buzzed in the pocket of my apron 20 minutes later, I felt my pulse spike before I even looked. The message was from an unknown number. 4 words. Are you safe right now? My phone felt heavier than it should have as I slipped it out of my apron pocket and turned slightly toward the service station so no one could see the screen. Are you safe right now? 4 simple words. No name. No introduction. My throat went dry. I did not need to ask who it was. I did not need to save the number to recognize the intention behind it. I stared at the message long enough for the screen to dim once, then twice. I did not respond. Not yet. Table 7 was still occupied. He was still there, finishing his drink slowly, watching me over the rim of the glass as if nothing in the world had shifted. I forced my hands to keep moving. I picked up plates. I wiped down a nearby table that did not need wiping. The restaurant lights glowed warm and golden, but I felt cold under my uniform. My phone buzzed again. Answer yes or no. The directness of it made my pulse jump. No pressure. No dramatic language. Just a request for clarity. I typed back before I could overthink it. Yes. 3 seconds passed. Then another message appeared. Leave through the kitchen in 15 minutes. Alone. I swallowed. 15 minutes felt like a lifetime and a blink at the same time. I glanced at the clock above the bar. 9:45. My shift ended at 10. Close enough to be believable. You look pale, he said when I stopped by table 7 to drop the check. His voice was softer now, almost concerned. I am just tired, I replied. Long day. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. We will talk at home. The words settled into my chest like a weight. At home. The place that was supposed to feel safe. The place that had not felt safe in a long time. I stepped away and made my way toward the kitchen doors, counting each minute in my head. The sounds behind me blurred together, forks against plates, laughter, the hum of conversation. I did not look toward the entrance. I did not look for a dark suit or steady eyes. I focused on breathing in through my nose and out through my mouth like I had read somewhere online. 10 minutes. 12. 14. Emily. The manager called from behind the host stand. You can clock out early tonight. I turned slowly. Are you sure? He gave me a tight smile. Yes. Go ahead. I nodded and walked through the swinging doors into the kitchen, the air hotter and louder back there, cooks shouting orders, pans clattering. Everything felt normal. Too normal. I grabbed my worn denim jacket from my locker and slipped my phone into my pocket again. My hands were steady now, which surprised me. When I pushed through the back exit into the alley, cool night air rushed over my skin. The city sounded different back there. Less polished. More honest. A black sedan was parked at the curb, engine idling quietly. Not flashy, not dramatic, just present. The rear passenger door opened before I reached the sidewalk. He stepped out instead of staying inside. The streetlight above cast a soft glow over his face, sharpening the lines of his jaw, catching the silver at his temples. You answered yes, he said. It was not a question. I did, I replied. My voice did not shake. Good, he said simply. Get in. I hesitated for half a second, glancing back toward the restaurant's rear door. It remained closed. No one had followed me. No one had called my name. This is not a kidnapping, he added calmly, as if reading the flicker of doubt in my expression. It is an option. The word option felt foreign on my tongue. I had not felt like I had one in a long time. If I get in, I asked quietly, what happens? His eyes held mine, steady and certain. Then I make sure you are safe. And I do not ask you to write it again. The night air moved between us, cool and electric. For the first time in months, the choice felt like it belonged to me. I did not let myself overthink it. If I had, I would have turned back toward the restaurant door, back toward the life I understood even if it hurt. Instead, I stepped forward and slid into the back seat of the sedan. The leather was cool against my palms. The door closed with a soft, final sound that felt louder than it was. He walked around the front of the car and took the seat beside me rather than the one in front. The driver did not look at either of us. The engine remained steady, almost silent, as we pulled away from the curb. I kept my hands folded in my lap so he would not see them tremble. Where are we going? I asked. Somewhere neutral, he replied. Public. Safe. Streetlights passed over his face in slow intervals, light and shadow, revealing nothing but control. You do not know me, I said quietly. No, he agreed. But I know patterns. I looked out the window at storefronts sliding by. You think you know mine? He did not hesitate. I saw how he watches you. That is not affection. That is possession. The words settled heavily in the air. I did not respond. After a few minutes, the car stopped in front of a late-night cafe that stayed open until midnight. The kind of place with bright windows and too much sugar in the air. He stepped out first and opened my door, not touching me, just waiting. I followed him inside. The cafe was half full with students and night shift workers. Ordinary people. Normal conversations. It felt deliberate. We took a table near the front window. He did not order alcohol this time. Just black coffee. I asked for water because my throat felt tight. You said this was an option, I began once we were seated. What exactly does that mean? He rested his forearms lightly on the table. No rings. No visible weapons. Just presence. It means you can walk out of here in 10 minutes and return to your current situation, he said evenly. And I will not interfere. My stomach twisted. And if I do not, then I put distance between you and the threat. His tone did not change. No drama. No threats. Just certainty. You talk like you own the city, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. A faint hint of something almost amused crossed his expression. Ownership is a childish word, he replied. I prefer responsibility. I studied him more carefully now. The tailored suit. The controlled posture. The way other customers subtly glanced at him and then looked away. Why would you take responsibility for me? I asked. He held my gaze without blinking. Because you asked. The simplicity of that answer caught me off guard. I wrote it on a napkin, I said. You saw it. That does not mean I asked you. You asked anyone who would notice, he corrected gently. I noticed. Silence stretched between us. The cafe door opened and closed behind a pair of laughing college students. The world outside our table continued without caring about the weight of this moment. If I leave with you tonight, I said slowly, what happens to him? His expression did not harden. It sharpened. He will be informed that you are no longer available to him, he replied. By who? I pressed. By the kind of people he does not ignore. A chill moved down my spine. Not because of fear. Because of possibility. I do not want him hurt, I said quickly. The words came out before I could filter them. He watched me carefully. I did not say he would be, he said. Consequences do not require chaos. Sometimes they require clarity. I looked down at the condensation on my water glass. For months, I had told myself I was exaggerating, that things would improve, that if I just tried harder, smiled more, stayed quieter, the tension would ease. But sitting here, under bright fluorescent lights with coffee machines hissing in the background, I realized something else. I was tired of trying to shrink. If I say yes, I whispered, I need to know something. Ask. Are you doing this because you want control? His answer came without delay. No. I am doing this because someone else already thinks they have it. The honesty in that response unsettled me more than any threat could have. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and placed a simple card on the table. No logo. Just a name and a number. Adrian Moretti. You do not have to decide in this moment, he said. But understand this. Once I step in, I do not step halfway. The weight of that promise settled over me like a line drawn in ink. And for the first time, I realized that the choice in front of me was not between two men. It was between staying silent and finally being heard. The card stayed between us long after he released it, his name printed in clean black letters that felt heavier than paper should. Adrian Moretti. I traced the edge of it with my eyes, but did not touch it. If I walk back into that apartment tonight, I said slowly, nothing changes. It was not a question. He did not pretend otherwise. No, he said. It does not. The honesty did not frighten me. It steadied me. I had grown used to half-truths and reassurances that dissolved by morning. This was different. This was a line drawn in clear ink. Outside the cafe window, traffic moved steadily under streetlights, headlights streaking past like quiet witnesses. You said once you step in, you do not step halfway, I continued. What does stepping in look like? He leaned back slightly in his chair, studying me with the same measured focus he had in the restaurant. It looks like distance, he said. New arrangements. Different locks. A number that does not reach you anymore. My chest tightened. He will not just accept that. Adrian's expression did not change. He will be advised that contact is no longer appropriate. The phrasing was almost clinical. Advised by who? I pressed. By me, he replied simply. Silence fell between us again, but it felt less suffocating now. I realized I was not afraid of him. Not in the way I had expected to. B. There was no rush, no pressure in his voice. Only certainty. Why me? I asked quietly. You have no reason to involve yourself. He considered that for a moment. You underestimate the value of being seen, he said. Most people pretend they do not notice. It is easier that way. I do not. The words landed deeper than I wanted to admit. For months I had convinced myself that if no one commented, then maybe nothing was wrong. That if I could hide the tension in my shoulders and the way I checked my phone too often, then it would fade on its own. If I say yes, I said, finally looking directly at him, this does not become another form of control. His gaze did not waver. You will have your own place, he answered. Your own accounts. Your own choices. I am not offering a cage. The certainty in his tone made my pulse steady instead of race. Then what are you offering? I asked. Protection, he said. Not possessive. Not dramatic. Just clear. I glanced down at the card again. The cafe door chimed as someone else entered, the ordinary sound grounding me in the moment. I cannot disappear without warning, I murmured. He will come looking. He can look, Adrian replied calmly. He will not find what he expects. There was no threat in his voice, just confidence built on something I could not see. I realized then that this was the difference between fear and authority. Fear demanded. Authority decided. If I leave with you tonight, I said, I do not want anyone thinking I was taken. You will not be, he said. You will call him yourself. You will say you need space, that you are staying elsewhere. You will not explain further. My stomach tightened at the thought of that conversation. And if he refuses to accept it? Adrian's eyes held mine steadily. Then he will learn that refusal has limits. The calm in his delivery unsettled me more than raised voices ever had. I exhaled slowly, feeling something inside me shift. Not reckless, not impulsive, just tired of shrinking. All right, I said softly. The word felt fragile and enormous at the same time. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He simply nodded once, as if this had always been the most logical outcome. Finish your water, he said. Quietly. We leave in 5 minutes. I wrapped my hands around the glass, noticing they were no longer trembling. Outside, the night felt different than it had an hour ago. Less like a threat, more like a doorway. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, the choice I was about to make felt like it belonged entirely to me. The night air felt sharper when we stepped out of the cafe, like the city had shifted while we were inside. I held the card in my hand now, the edges pressing lightly into my palm as if to remind me that this was real. Adrian opened the card door again without touching me, giving me the space to choose even in small movements. I slid into the back seat, and this time I did not hesitate. As the sedan pulled away from the curb, I took out my phone. My reflection in the dark window looked different. Not braver, just clearer. "Call him now," Adrian said quietly from beside me. Not commanding, just steady. I nodded and pressed his name. The ringing felt louder than it should have. He answered on the second ring. "Where are you?" His voice was tight, controlled in the way that meant it was not for long. I swallowed. "I am not coming home tonight." Silence. Then a short laugh that did not sound amused. "What are you talking about?" "I need space," I said, forcing each word to come out evenly. "I am staying somewhere else." "With who?" The question snapped out instantly. I looked straight ahead at the passing streetlights. "That is not your concern." The quiet on the other end shifted, thick and dangerous in a way I knew too well. "Emily," he said slowly, "do not do something stupid." My chest tightened, but I kept my voice calm. "I am not. I am choosing." Another silence. Longer this time. "You think you can just walk away?" he asked. I closed my eyes for half a second. "Yes," I said. The word surprised even me with how steady it sounded. He exhaled sharply. "We will talk about this in the morning." "No," I replied. "We will not." My hand was not shaking. I noticed that with quiet disbelief. "Do not come to the restaurant," I added. "Do not call me again tonight." I ended the call before he could answer. The car remained silent for a few seconds after I lowered the phone. Adrian did not ask what was said. He did not need to. "You did well," he said finally. The words were simple, but they landed deeper than praise. I stared at my dark screen. "He will not leave it at that." "No," Adrian agreed. "He will not." The city shifted outside the window from busy streets to quieter residential blocks. "And that is when you step in?" I asked. His gaze moved briefly to me. "I already have." We pulled into an underground garage beneath a modern building of glass and steel. The space was well lit, cameras visible in the corners. Orderly. Controlled. The driver parked near the elevator and stepped out without a word. Adrian followed, then looked back at me. "This is temporary," he said. "You will not be hidden. You will be relocated." The elevator ride was smooth and quiet. I watched the floor numbers climb, my reflection beside his in the mirrored walls. We looked like strangers standing too close in a photograph. When the doors opened, the hallway beyond was quiet and softly lit. He led me to a corner unit and unlocked the door. The apartment inside was furnished, but not personal. Clean lines. Neutral colors. Large windows overlooking the city. It did not feel like a trap. It felt like a pause. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "Tomorrow we arrange something permanent." I stepped inside slowly, listening to the faint hum of the city beyond the glass. "What happens now?" I asked. Adrian set his phone on the kitchen counter. "Now," he said calmly, "he receives a message that makes your decision clear." I turned toward him. "What kind of message?" His expression did not change. The kind that does not need to be repeated. A quiet certainty filled the room. Not loud, not violent, just final. I walked toward the window and looked down at the city lights stretching for miles. For the first time in months, I did not feel watched. I felt positioned. Protected not by fear, but by intention. Behind me, Adrian's voice softened slightly. "You are not alone anymore," he said. And in the stillness of that unfamiliar apartment, I realized the most dangerous thing about tonight was not the man I left behind. It was the fact that someone had finally decided to stand between me and the silence. I did not sleep much that night. The apartment was quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar. No television murmuring in the background, no footsteps pacing across a living room floor. Just the distant hum of traffic far below and the soft ticking of a clock on the wall. Adrian had left after making 2 brief phone calls in the kitchen, his voice low and steady, his tone unchanged. He did not explain what was said. He did not need to. Before he walked out, he paused near the door. "Lock it behind me," he said. "No one enters without your permission." It was the first time in months that someone had said the word permission to me and meant it. I stood by the window long after he left, city lights stretching out like constellations. My phone remained on the counter where I had set it down. It did not ring again that night. No flood of messages. No escalating demands. The silence felt deliberate, like something had shifted outside my view. Morning arrived gently, pale light filtering through the floor to ceiling windows. For a moment I forgot where I was. Then I remembered everything at once. The card still rested on the kitchen island. Adrian Moretti. as if the night had been a business arrangement instead of a turning point. I showered in a bathroom that smelled faintly of clean linen and something citrus. The water pressure was strong, steady. I realized I had been bracing myself for a knock on the door that never came. At 9 o'clock, my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. He will not contact you again. It was not signed, but I knew. My breath caught, not in fear, but in disbelief. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Nothing followed. No angry text. No missed calls. No voicemail filled with accusations. Just quiet. I told myself it was temporary, that he would try another way. Yet the hours passed without interruption. Around noon, there was a soft knock at the door. Not pounding, not impatient, just measured. I looked through the security screen before unlocking it. Adrian stood in the hallway alone, suit crisp as always, expression unreadable. I opened the door slowly. "Good morning," he said. The normalcy of it unsettled me more than any dramatic gesture would have. "What did you do?" I asked. He stepped inside without crossing too close. "I clarified boundaries," he replied. "He understands them." Just like that. I pressed. Adrian met my gaze steadily. Men like him rely on noise. On reaction. Remove the audience and the leverage disappears. I searched his face for signs of exaggeration. There were none. "He will not come here?" I asked. No, the certainty in his voice left no space for doubt. I walked back toward the window, sunlight warming the hardwood floors. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," I admitted quietly. "For the apology. The flowers. The promises." Adrian remained near the kitchen, giving me distance even in conversation. "That is a pattern," he said. "Not a resolution." I nodded slowly. He was right. The cycle had always been predictable. Tension. Apology. Temporary calm. Then tension again. "This is not charity," he continued after a moment. "You will have your own lease by the end of the week. Separate accounts. Your job if you want it. Or another, if you prefer." I turned to face him fully. Why go this far? His expression softened slightly, not in weakness, but in something quieter. "Because you chose to step out," he said. "And when someone chooses that, they deserve solid ground." The words settled into the space between us. Solid ground. I had not realized how long I had been standing on something fragile. My phone buzzed once more on the counter. I glanced at it instinctively. A bank notification. Nothing else. No name I had learned to dread. Just ordinary life continuing. I exhaled slowly, tension leaving my shoulders in a way I had not felt before. Adrian watched the change without comment. "You are safe," he said finally. Not as a promise. As a fact. And for the first time, I believed him. A week passed without disruption. No late-night calls. No sudden appearances outside my job. No familiar shadow at the edge of my vision. Silence, I realized, could be merciful when it was chosen instead of forced. Adrian moved quickly, but never hurried me. By Friday afternoon, I had keys to a small apartment 15 minutes from the restaurant. Bright windows facing east, hardwood floors that creaked softly when you walked across them. My name was on the lease. Only my name. When I signed the paperwork, my hand trembled for a different reason this time. Not fear. Responsibility. "You do not owe me anything for this," Adrian said as we stepped out of the leasing office. The sky above us was clear, late summer warmth settling over the city. "I know," I replied. And I did. That was the difference. The restaurant felt different when I returned for my next shift. The lights were the same. The scent of garlic and wine still clung to the air. But I stood straighter behind the host's stand. My manager gave me a curious look when I clocked in. "Everything good?" he asked. "Yes," I said simply. It was not a lie. Halfway through the evening, I caught my reflection in the glass of the front window. My shoulders were no longer rounded inward. I was not scanning the room for someone who might be watching. I was just working. Around 8:30, the door opened, and for a brief second my pulse spiked out of habit. But it was only a couple celebrating an anniversary, the woman laughing as her partner held the door. I exhaled slowly. Patterns take time to unlearn. Later that night, as I carried a tray past table 13, the memory hit me without warning. The napkin, the ink pressing into fabric. The moment someone noticed. I paused near the bar and looked toward the entrance. He was not there. I did not expect him to be. Adrian did not move impulsively. When he chose to appear, it meant something. My phone buzzed just once in my apron pocket near the end of my shift. I stepped into the hallway to check it. A single message. "How is the new place?" No greeting. No signature. I found myself smiling slightly before I typed back. It feels like mine. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Good. A pause. Then another message. Remember that. The simplicity of it carried more weight than any elaborate promise. When I walked out into the parking lot after closing, the night air wrapped around me softly. My car sat under a streetlight, unremarkable and ordinary. I unlocked it without glancing over my shoulder. As I pulled onto the road, I noticed a black sedan a few cars behind me. Not close. Not obvious. Just present. I did not panic. I recognized the shape, the way it maintained distance. Protection did not always announce itself. Sometimes it simply stayed within sight. At a red light, I caught a glimpse of the driver through my rearview mirror. Not Adrian. Someone else. Calm. Focused. I understood then that stepping out of silence did not mean stepping alone into chaos. It meant someone had decided my quiet request deserved an answer. When I reached my apartment building, the sedan continued past without slowing. I parked and sat in my car for a moment, listening to the tick of the cooling engine. My life had not transformed into something glamorous or dramatic. I still worked double shifts. I still worried about bills. But the air felt different. Lighter. Upstairs, I unlocked my door and stepped into a space that belonged only to me. I set my keys on the counter and leaned against the wall, letting the quiet settle around me. For months, I had believed strength meant enduring, staying, adjusting. Now I understood something else. Strength sometimes looks like 4 small letters written in ink. And power is not always the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it is the one who sees before you speak and chooses to stand there anyway.